You just heard that from a Republican senator, not a Democrat, not a protest sign, not a cable news pundit. A Republican senator on Fox News explaining exactly why the government is shut down and why the people protecting your airports aren't getting paid. That clip didn't come from the opposition, it came from inside the House. And that's exactly why this hearing got uncomfortable fast. Because when Congressman Goldman walked into that room today, he didn't come with talking points, he came with receipts. The woman sitting across from him is the head of the TSA. Her agency is in its third funding gap of the fiscal year. Her officers are showing up to work without a paycheck, and instead of getting answers about who is responsible for that, she spent most of her time explaining why ICE agents eating candy bars and yawning at airport checkpoints are actually a perfectly reasonable substitute for her trained, credentialed, underpaid workforce. I want you to watch this exchange carefully, because what looks like a budget disagreement on the surface is actually something much more revealing. It's about who is being protected here, who is being left out, and who made the call that put all of this in motion. Pay attention to how many times a direct question does not get a direct answer. Pay attention to the moment Goldman stops being polite. And pay attention to what happens when a senator from the other side of the aisle accidentally tells the whole story in 30 seconds on Fox News. Let's get into it. Let's just sit with what we actually watched for a second, because I want to make sure this doesn't get lost in the noise. The head of the TSA just sat in a congressional hearing and could not answer whether she would prefer her own agency to be fully funded over having ICE agents fill the gap. That is not a trick question. That is not a partisan trap. That is the most basic question you could ask the leader of any organization. Would you like your people to be paid? And she couldn't say yes cleanly. She couldn't say it without qualifying it, softening it, wrapping it in gratitude for the very situation that is causing her agency harm. And I understand why she did it. She works for this administration. She knows who is watching. She knows what happens to officials who step out of line even slightly. We've seen it enough times to know the pattern. But here is the part that should bother everyone regardless of party. This is the third shutdown of the fiscal year. Third, not the first, not some unexpected emergency. The third time in a single fiscal year that the people responsible for screening every passenger at every airport in the United States have gone without guaranteed pay. And TSA officers are not highly compensated to begin with. These are workers who show up at 4 in the morning, who handle hundreds of passengers an hour, who are the first line of security between the traveling public and a threat. And the response to their situation is ICE agents eating candy bars at checkpoints. Goldman's frustration in that room was visible, and it was legitimate because he wasn't just making a political argument, he was pointing at something specific. The Democrats offered a deal: fund everything except ICE. A Republican senator confirmed it on Fox News, not some leaked memo, not a rumor, on camera, on the record, and Trump said no deals with the Democrats. That's the sentence that explains everything happening in that hearing room. Every evasive answer McNeel gave, every long pause before a non-answer, every redirect toward gratitude for ICE's presence. All of it traces back to that one sentence from the president: no deals with the Democrats. Which means the shutdown is not about budget math. It's not about fiscal responsibility. It's not about national security concerns over ICE. According to a sitting Republican senator, it is about the president refusing a deal that would have solved the problem because it came from the other side. And the people paying for that decision are TSA workers who can't pay their rent, are travelers standing in lines being screened by agents who are never trained for this job, are Homeland Security professionals across CISA and the Coast Guard and every other unfunded agency wondering how long they are expected to keep working on goodwill alone. Goldman ended that exchange by telling McNeel directly to call her boss and tell him to take the deal. That is an extraordinary thing for a congressman to say to a cabinet official in a formal hearing. It's not normal. And the fact that it felt completely reasonable given the context tells you exactly how far outside normal we already are. The question that nobody in that room answered, and the question I'll leave you with, is this: if a Republican senator is willing to go on Fox News and say Trump personally killed the deal that would have ended this shutdown, and if that information is now part of the congressional record, at what point does someone inside that party decide that loyalty to one person is costing more than it is worth? Because the shutdown doesn't just cost money, it costs readiness, it costs morale, it costs the credibility of every official who sits in that chair and tries to defend the indefensible with a straight face. McNeel was not the villain of this hearing. She looked like someone trapped between what she knows is true and what she is allowed to say out loud. And that gap, that visible, uncomfortable gap between knowledge and permission, that is exactly what Goldman wanted the cameras to see. Whether anyone in a position to act on it actually does is the only question left. And let me go a little deeper on that gap, because I think it is the most important thing in this entire exchange, and most people scrolled past it without noticing. When McNeel said she was thankful for ICE being there to alleviate the burden, she was not speaking as a security professional giving her honest operational assessment. She was performing gratitude for a political decision she had no control over. And everyone in that room knew it. Goldman knew it, the cameras knew it, and based on the look on her face when she said it, McNeel knew it too. That is what institutional capture looks like in real time. It is not dramatic, it is not loud, it is a senior government official choosing words very carefully because the wrong 3 syllables could end her career before the hearing is over. And that dynamic, that constant self-censorship at the highest levels of government, is what makes these agencies less effective, less honest, and ultimately less safe for the public they are supposed to serve. Think about what it means operationally for a moment. The TSA exists for one reason: to make sure that the people getting on planes do not pose a threat to the people already on those planes and to everyone on the ground below. That is the entire mission. It is not complicated. It is not partisan. And it requires trained, experienced, focused personnel who know the protocols, know the technology, know the behavioral indicators, and know how to make fast decisions under pressure. ICE agents are trained for something completely different. They are trained for enforcement operations, for apprehension, for immigration law compliance. Their skill set is real, their training is real, but it is not the same skill set, it is not the same training, and putting them at a TSA checkpoint is not a seamless substitution. It is a gap pretending to be a solution. So when Goldman mentioned the videos of ICE agents yawning and eating candy bars, he wasn't just making a rhetorical point about optics. He was pointing at a genuine security concern dressed up as a budget workaround. And the fact that the official response to that concern was essentially, "We are grateful for the help," tells you that the people running this are prioritizing the appearance of function over actual function. That should make every single person who flies uncomfortable. Now let's talk about the Kennedy clip for a moment, because I do not think it has gotten nearly enough attention. A sitting Republican senator went on Fox News, the most watched conservative media outlet in the country, and described in plain language how a deal to end the shutdown was constructed, presented to the president, and personally rejected, not delayed. Not sent back for revisions, rejected, with the words, "No deals with the Democrats." Kennedy did not say this reluctantly. He did not hedge it. He laid it out step by step like someone who had already made peace with the fact that the story was going to come out eventually anyway. And that kind of resigned candor from inside the party is actually more alarming than the statement itself, because it means this is not a secret. It means people in that party know exactly what is happening, and they are beginning to calculate whether it is worth continuing to cover for it. That is a fracture. It may be small right now. It may not lead anywhere immediately. But fractures in political coalitions do not usually announce themselves loudly. They show up in moments exactly like this one. A senator on cable news telling the honest version of events because he has decided that the cost of loyalty has exceeded the benefit. And Goldman put that clip on a screen in a formal congressional hearing. He made it part of the official record. He made sure that the next time someone asks why TSA workers are going without pay, there is a documented moment where a Republican senator answered that question on camera. That is deliberate, that is strategic, and that matters beyond this one hearing. Because the congressional record does not disappear. It gets cited, it gets referenced, it becomes the foundation for the next question and the question after that. Goldman planted something in that room today that will outlast the news cycle. Now I want to address something that I know is going to come up in the comments. Some people are going to say this is just politics. Both sides do it. Shutdowns happen under every administration. And to be clear, yes, shutdowns have happened before. Yes, funding fights are not new. But the specific detail that makes this different is the documented, on-record, Republican-confirmed reason for why this particular shutdown is continuing. It is not a policy disagreement. It is not a philosophical difference about the size of government. According to Senator Kennedy, it is one person's refusal to accept a deal because of who offered it. That is not governance. That is ego in a suit making decisions that affect hundreds of thousands of federal workers and millions of daily travelers. And the person who has to sit in front of Congress and absorb the questions for that decision is not the person who made it. McNeel did not shut the government down. McNeel did not reject the deal. McNeel is managing the consequences of a decision that was made above her, around her, and without any apparent concern for what it would mean for her agency or her workforce. And she has to sit there and be grateful. That is the part I cannot stop thinking about. Not the politics, not the numbers, the human cost of being a professional in a system that has decided your expertise is less important than someone else's leverage. If you were a TSA officer watching this right now, I want you to know that what Goldman said in that room was said on your behalf. And if you are a traveler who flew through an airport this week and stood in a longer line than usual, now you know exactly why. The shutdown is not abstract. It is the line you stood in. It is the checkpoint that moves slower. It is the agency that cannot promise its own people a paycheck. And it is the president who was offered a way out and said no.